Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's Tuesday topic, social justice in a global context. Yeah, nice little woohoo for the Tuesday topic. Yeah. We are very nearly the way, actually this week is the 1-year anniversary of Tuesday topics. Last year we did 38 events and we had a total of 786 people participate, either live and in person or online. It's great. Next week we have APA Matters, which is about the common themes in the American Psychological Association in-text and end-of-paper reference styles. That'll be Stephen Gambesha. So if you want to join us for that, PhD students, really everybody's welcome whenever they would like to attend. Let's please welcome Dr. Ebony White from Counseling and Family Therapy. Come on up. Oh, wait, let me just... This isn't working. I don't know why.
Okay, I can. Oh, it is working.
Well, let me figure out how to get this working.
All right, perfect. I'll get started. Hi, everybody. Look at these smiling faces. So hello to everybody who's here and online. As Darren just said, I'm Dr. Ebony White. I am an assistant clinical professor in the Department of Counseling and Family Therapy. It's good to see some familiar faces. I'm also the program director for the Master's in Addictions Counseling program that we have, which is completely online, and a certificate in substance use disorders. With that said, I will be sending my students to that APA Tuesday topic next week. It is a very timely topic for students. And so today I have roughly about 30 minutes because I have to leave time for questions to talk about this really broad topic. So I want you to adjust your expectations to that. So we're not going to get into deep detail about what social justice is. And we certainly are going to be talking about every country in our world, right? But what I will frame this conversation about is how the university sees it, how our college sees it, and what we've been doing to attend to these things, particularly in our study abroad programs, and even more specifically in the ICAs, which is intensive course abroad, that I was blessed enough to accompany one of our assistant deans on one of hers to Singapore this year. So I'll talk probably, most of my examples will come from that. I'm also getting over a cold, so I apologize for the mucusy sound you are hearing. I will also say this. I am more like a Baptist preacher when it comes to presenting. So I'm going to need you to talk back to me. And I might ask questions and be conversational, and I could, when I'm doing a good job, you could just say amen or whatever. And if you have questions online, please feel free to type them into your box, and then Darren will let us know and feed those questions to me.
Well, actually, it's not working, so we can just advance it using the keys.
Mm-hmm.
So let me move.
No, I can do it.
You sure?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm a strong, independent woman. There you go. Shut up to Beyonce. Grown woman. Drexel University mission, and I'll read this. Most of the slides I won't read verbatim. If you need me to, just let me know. But I also kind of highlighted what I found to be important according to the topic. So Drexel University, this is Drexel University's mission, fulfills our founder's vision of preparing each new generation of students for productive professional and civic lives, while also focusing our collective experience on solving society's greatest problems, which is a really big thing. Drexel is an academically comprehensive and globally engaged urban research university dedicated to advancing knowledge of society and to providing every student with a valuable, rigorous, experiential, technology-infused education enriched by the nation's premier cooperative education program. And I didn't flub on any words, so I can get an
Amen.
All right. Absolutely. So the two things that I have highlighted on this slide is solving society's greatest problems. And so before I talk about what social justice is, I want you to think about what society, how you define society in your own perception of that, right? And so when you think of society and maybe one or two people, what comes to mind for you? And I'll repeat it so that people online can hear. When you define society for yourself, for the students here, the staff here, and also faculty here, how do you frame that?
Governing systems.
Governing systems. So you've moved already to social justice, right? Thinking systemically. Yes.
A lack of empathy for other people.
Collective empathy?
No,
a lack of empathy
for other people.
Oh, okay. So when you think of society, you think of a lack of empathy for other people.
No, I think one of our biggest problems is that people don't care about, some people don't care about other people or the communities around them, surrounding them.
Right, but absolutely, I actually, so a lack of empathy for other people, I'm going to reduce that to a single word, egocentric or ethnocentric, right? And so this idea of things are what I say they are based on my own experience, right? So absolutely. Anybody else have anything different to add?
I got it. Sorry.
Go ahead.
System of beliefs.
A system of beliefs based on?
People's experience.
Right, based on people's own experiences.
I have a visual for you. Just ever extending concentric circles, like pockets, like collections, and then growing from there.
So ever extending concentric circles, and you know that came from an instructor, right? So those of you online, you have the benefit, you can Google all of that. But she's talking about those circles where there are things that intertwine and expand.
And they just grow.
And they grow and grow and grow. Right, absolutely, very good. So society is code for the sphere in which I reside, right? The sphere in which I reside. And so that word I is really important, so I want you to hold on to that. And then when you think about Drexel University as a globally engaged urban research university, what does that mean? So working backwards, Urban Research University, we're based out of Philadelphia, right? This is a very urban environment. But what does it mean when you put those two phrases together, globally engaged and Urban Research University? And that's a rhetorical question because I'm just going to talk about that. But I want you to, to think about how you see that and what that means to you when you read those words on Drexel University's mission. So it means that we have this urban perspective on how we engage globally. Right? So what does it mean to be a university that's based right in the heart of Philadelphia, that's trying to affect change around the world? How do the problems that we're faced with here inform how we address issues other places that we go? I see a lot of head nods, so it means I'm making sense. So awesome. All right. So this is the mission of our college, right? And again, I highlighted what I found to be the most important terms relevant to the conversation that we're having today. So CNHP prepares competent, that word competent. So I am going to stop there. I should have highlighted that, right? So I'm a counselor and I'll have some counseling definitions up there. You can go into your own fields and look how you all define things. But I like to stop at competence because Darrell Sue defines it as knowledge, awareness, and skills, right? And so how informed are we? How aware are we of three things: self, others, environment, and the interactions of all of those things? And then our skills, how capable are we? So prepares competent and compassionate health professionals through, again, technology-infused and evidence-based programs. The college is committed to leading the way in improving health, reducing health disparities through innovative education, interdisciplinary research, and community-based practice initiatives, right? And so reducing health disparities. So think about the fields in which all of you are interested in or which all of you work. what would that look like? Or what does that look like for you?
Equal access.
Equal access or equitable access?
Equitable access.
Equitable access.
Decentralized education.
Here she goes again. Decentralized education.
It also refers to a whole range of factors that are beyond healthcare.
Mm-hmm.
So it calls us to scrutinize the entire social context for injustice.
So it calls us to scrutinize the entire context of society, in particular because CNHP of how we see health and health disparities, okay, and how we address those things. And then community-based. I attend these really informative and really interesting. I see there are some questions, so 1 second. Really informative and really interesting.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay.
That was me typing to them.
Oh,
So
okay.
If you want to say something, say something.
Blame it on ADHD. I saw something blinking. Automatically, a question. All right. No, but seriously, community-based pricing. I attend these research forums here that occur at the university, and we talk about what does it really mean to be community-based? Does it just mean going into the community? Does it mean community-informed?
Building community.
Building community?
Working with the community.
Working with the community? What about things that are just community generated? That may not have been our idea at all.
Backing them up.
Backing, right, having their backs. Right?
Getting out of the way.
Getting out of the way. And sometimes that's social justice, right? Realizing or recognizing, and you're jumping ahead of my presentation, but that's okay. And hopefully Darren's keeping time. But right, sometimes we have to recognize when we're not the authority in something. And so we, one of our strategic goals, the third one in red, I really wanted you to see it, is enhance our global impact. And I think the way that we do that is, of course, having our names attached to things, but really helping to solve society's greatest problems, reducing health disparities, and being community-based. With community, just like society, recognizing that we all have our own definitions of what community and society mean, but also realizing that it's much bigger than how we frame it for ourselves, or even how we frame it in educational spaces. I really want him to remove the orange light. It's distracting me. All right. So social justice, I told you I was going to choose counseling people. What is it? So the first thing social justice does, it acknowledges issues of power, privilege, and oppression. Right? And if I had 4 hours, I would have all of you do the addressing model, right? And I would have all of you write down your identities and where you fit, and I will have you all star your identities of privilege, and we would process it and have really intense conversation about it, but I do not have 4 hours, right? So we cannot have that, another thing popped up. So we cannot have that conversation. But it's important to understand that there are identities that we hold that give us privileges that we did not earn. That gives us power that we did not earn, right? And that also gives us oppression that we did not earn, right? And along with that, there are systems outside of what we see as just healthcare or society. There are systems, those concentric circles. I know I could work that back in. There are systems that maintain those levels of power, privilege, and oppression.
The smoke screen around the whole thing.
Exactly. I like, you know, one of my favorite texts to use in my multicultural class is by Dr. Beverly Tatum. It's called, and I always get this wrong, Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together in the Cafeteria, right? Oh, that was correct? Winning. All right. And she talks about how when we think about oppression, the first thing that comes to my mind is racism. And she talks about how racism is like smog, where you may not be responsible for creating it, but we're all breathing it in, right? And so it's important to understand that. So social justice addresses inequitable social, political, that's what, I was gonna say Natalie, hope that delivery person said earlier, social, political, and economic conditions that impede the development of individuals, families, and communities, right? So I was in, as some of you know, Nigeria earlier this year, and one of the, you didn't know that? And one of the, I'm international. And one of the professors who were speaking at the time, he broke people down into these different, into really rude terms, right? But he talked about how you have citizens, you have, I think he said jerks or something like that. He was just naming different levels of society. And he talked about how sometimes what's best for me isn't what's best. Can we recognize that? That sometimes me not getting what I want is the best thing for society, right? And as he was doing his presentation, I was thinking about the society and multiple levels of community that I belong to, and how in many spaces, people operate off that I told you to hold on to, right? How do I win in this situation, right? I want us all to win, but how do I win? You know what I mean? And sometimes the person who wants to win would do a better service to others if they weren't the one who came out on top. And so how do we address these inequitable situations, particularly in the healthcare system, in the way that pushes toward what the communities who we work with see as success? I know that was loaded, but I'm about to get into who defines and who gets to decide what's best. Right? All right. Any questions? Does that make sense before I move on? I have a double mic now. Like, this is amazing. It's not working.
Brian, can you help us?
Oh, got it. I had to click through.
Transition.
So this is one of the slides I use, and I think that's the correct time. So I'm going to spend maybe 5 minutes here. So equality versus equity. So this first image is an image of equality. And so you see 3 figures, all of different heights, and they all got a crate to stand on in order to see what seems to be a baseball game, right? When you look at that picture and everyone was treated equally, it didn't work, right? Because the person who was the tallest is now taller, right? The person who could see from the beginning now could see from an even more privileged position, right? The other person who couldn't see, now they can see, and now you have someone who couldn't see and still can't see. And that's what equality does. It maintains the status quo. It gives us the impression that we're do-gooders when we're not doing anything at all, but keeping things as is. It's like, oh, well, we gave everybody a hat, but you gave people who had 20 hats a hat, right? And then you have equity, and that's the second image. And that's when people are assessed for what they need, and then they are given what they need in order to be at the same, or seemingly given what they need in order to be at the same level with everybody else. All right, so the shortest person got 2 crates, the tallest person didn't get any crates, and the middle person got 1 crate. And here's the thing, without me making this a controversial topic, even though it's controversial in and of itself, but there are a lot of people who get angry with that, right? Especially when you have a lot of privilege and you mean, I don't get a crate, right? And so they feel like you're taking something away from them. So it causes problems and tension and conversation, right?
Or you're giving something special to someone else.
Right, or you're giving special treatment.
How is he gonna get that?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And then some of you talked about the systemic barriers. Like, why do we have this fence up there in the first place? Why don't we just remove the barrier for everybody? And so when I teach from this slide, all my students think they want a cookie because they say, oh, we know the third option is the best option, right? It's like, that's the best thing that we could do. But is that the best we could do? Let's examine what's wrong with the picture. So what was wrong? I'm not going to go back, but what was wrong with the picture? Or what did you see as potential obstacles?
The lower fence.
So the last picture.
Oh, sorry.
So no, I didn't clarify. So what was wrong with that last image? Put on your social justice, globally engaged.
I mean, it's still hard for the little kid to see the game because the angle from which they're seeing something different than the tallest person, well, than any of the other. But each person is seeing something different, but then you don't know what is, I don't know if in theory.
I think you're almost there. Keep going.
What is the best, you know, and is there a best view?
Do we have a handheld mic
I can go.
that we can pass around? Okay.
Well, also
So they're seeing something different. What is? We don't know what the best view. I just want to make sure people online can hear.
Yeah.
They can hear them?
decides what is that best view? Posture.
Who decides what's the best view?
Right.
Early and then. Go ahead.
Oh, why can't they be inside the stadium?
Why can't they? This group is so.
They're still trying to marry.
Y'all get on my nerves. Anyway,
Interrelated, they're
she
still
said,
behind the barrier.
why they're
They're still
still
behind the
behind the
barrier.
barrier. What else is wrong with the picture? Let's see how really good you are. And that sentence made no sense, but you know what I mean. How really good you are. How good you really are. All the way in the back.
I might be thinking too much into it, but we're still looking at it. They're all still able-bodied. Like we still get considered all parameters of that.
Like what if someone's blind?
Yeah, like somebody might be blind. Somebody that you can't see. You can't stand long. You can't. Like there's just a lot of things considered.
So let's go through the list just for the interest of time. The first thing is we look at the picture, everybody was white or appeared to be white, right? I went to Trenton Central High School in Trenton, New Jersey, where the population was Black, mostly, right? And then we had some brown and then everything else. I can probably count on one hand how many Black teachers I had, and I don't even need hands to tell you how many books I read by authors of color. Right? And I think about the research. Has anyone ever read the research? I think it's a seminal research book that says even the rat was white. If you haven't read it, right? Even the rat was white, right? And so how are we conscious and even the teaching tools that we are using when we are educating our students? Are they reflected? So race is up there. A lot of y'all jumped ahead of me. Gender, everyone appeared to be male. So not only what's missing or what status or what are the things we can't see that's missing from the picture, what are the things that we have been taught to ignore? Ability, y'all were smart enough to bring that up. The event, right? How come they aren't in the stadium, right? And not only that, when we chose the picture, is baseball something that everybody can relate to? Are we choosing something based on our own society, our own community, our own vantage point, right? Baseball, it's America's favorite pastime. People say that all over, everywhere we go. But what if we're not in America? Or what if we're working with someone who baseball is not important to them, right? Absolutely. So this is going to, and I'm doing good on time, awesome. So who's the expert? And I brought this up, I did some foreshadowing with this. So an expert is defined as a person who has a comprehensive and authoritative knowledge of or skill in a particular area. What has been the common error we've made in research and education and even community-based practice? And that's a real question, not rhetorical.
There's a lot of credit given to the written knowledge base and accomplishments therein.
So there's a lot of credit given to the written
the written database or, place
Mhm.
of authority.
Right.
Written
And
work.
so if it, I learned this when I was getting my PhD. My advisor, she said to me, if it's not written down, it didn't happen. Which already we have marginalized a large group of people
Amen.
and large groups of people.
And hidden the written works of
Yes.
others.
Mhm.
Well, because knowledge, there's a history of knowledge being built on top of knowledge.
Mhm.
So it just perpetuates exclusion, where if it has to relate to what came before it, we're getting narrower and narrower and narrower.
Mhm.
And the threshold to break that becomes insurmountable.
Mhm. Absolutely.
And also the idea of the, what do they call it? The academy, right? And how
Mhm.
things are, truth is formed in a group
Exactly.
of people. But, like climate change, there's people paid to dissuade others that climate change is real. And that literature still exists and is cited all the
Mhm.
time.
And it's cited all the
It's
time.
placed there to
Mhm.
mislead.
All the way in the back?
I was just
And then
gonna say, like, I think credentials is another thing.
Uh-huh.
Like, we kind of like, you have all these, initials after your name, that makes you.
Wait, hold up. Because I have a lot of letters.
Mission.
Wait.
Like,
Pause.
but like the person who doesn't have that, they're automatically kind of knocked out and they could essentially be an expert.
Absolutely.
Smokescreen.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
the smoke screen.
A smoke screen, yes. Kate.
I was just gonna say that people are labeled as experts who have knowledge about a topic but have not implemented it or worked in the field or had experience with the people they are looking to assist, help, work with.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so we tend to, and I wish Haji was here, we tend to take this anthropological viewpoint as, us do-gooders going to save the natives and help them with our wonderful knowledge and treatment and practices, and we're going to teach them our ways so that they can be better. Right? We tend to not just ignore, but devalue the knowledge of the insiders, that insider knowledge that many times is more important than our book knowledge and training that we have, right? And so one example is something that people relate to, that's why I pulled up, life expectancy. And so all these different places, this is per 2019, what the life expectancy is. And you see some places that I have up there have lower life expectancies than the USA, and a few have equal or higher, right? But what this graph doesn't show you, so all this graph shows you is the average amount of time that people live. It does not show you necessarily quality of life. It does not show you what type of life is valued. It does not show you how sickness is defined. It doesn't even show you how death is defined, right? And so if we just base things off of this chart, we've had a problem saying, oh, you know what? We have to go to these places because clearly they're doing worse than we are, right? But we've defined what worse is. That's just a quick example. And I'm almost done. So this is just a recap. So we talked about all of these things and how CNHP enacts global social justice. And so I'll talk briefly about some of these things. So we have a global classroom, which I actually don't have a bunch of information on, but I will share with you what I do have. I'll go back to it. So the global classroom is when we partner with a university in another country, and students are able to benefit from their knowledge. Study abroad is pretty self-explanatory. You go somewhere abroad and you study, right? And then the ICA, which I highlighted, is the intensive course abroad. And the one that I went to was in Singapore. And we actually have Dr. Carey in the room in case she wants to expound on it at the end. But one of the things that international experience gives our students, aside from those top three, the expanded worldview, which is really important, right? Especially with the students that I work with who really think it's all about them, right? They have been reared in a society that's quite narcissistic and haven't been exposed to many outside cultures. And so it helps to expand their worldview. And what does expanding your worldview do when you are a nurse, or when you're going to be a nurse or a clinician or a dance movement therapist, right? What does having that expanded worldview do for you in treatment? That's a real question. Maybe two people.
Well, it just takes us back to what you said earlier about, I see it as Drexel. I see it as, you know, this is my society.
Mm-hmm.
And then how do I expand that society when I go abroad?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yes.
I think it makes you stop and listen more to people because everybody's an expert in their own life and you can't project your ideas of how fun to another person.
Mm-hmm.
So they're there to tell you that, you know, what they know is best for them because this experience has shown you that you're not always right. And the way you perceive health in the world is not always the same.
Absolutely. 1, 2, 3.
And to piggyback off what she just said is to building your language, your own repertoire of what your feelings are and what other people's feelings can be. So having that language to support that.
I was once in a class, this is again in my PhD program, and the teacher said, well, how did you feel? I said, I felt disrespected. Another peer of mine said, well, that's not a feeling. Thank God there were other students in the room who said, oh, yes, it is, right? Because she said, well, Ebony, that's more of a cognition. I said, no, I felt that. Right? No, I felt that. And so what is even emotion to other people, and how do they explain that? Natalie and then Jess.
It puts problem solving in a contextual frame, and so you have multiple infinite possibilities, and the ability to ask about that and be aware of that, listen for that.
Right, exactly. You can't just tell everyone you should journal about that, right? It doesn't work for everybody. Absolutely.
I think it gives you a base of experience to challenge or begin to question things you take for granted.
Yes.
Oh, it can't be any other way.
Absolutely.
Well, it can be other ways.
Yeah. And going off of what you said, students start to have this, what does Dr. Helms call it? That, anyone familiar with the racial identity models? No?
No.
All right. So students have to come face to face with themselves. Encounter. Encounter, right? Like that clash. It's like, whoa, okay. I'm privileged, what? You know, and they have to go through this emotional process and this experience. They have to come to terms with who they are, how they're seen, how that impacts relationship and treatment, right? And that other people think, feel, and behave in different ways. And it's okay, right?
I'll just give you one very small example. We just got back from an IPA to Chile on global aging led by Jess Ballinger. And one of the students who didn't speak Spanish at all, the last day I was talking to her and she was just looking out the window and I was like, what are you thinking about? And she said, I am thinking about all the people in our country who don't speak English because I've gone through this whole week. So like, it was so, it was like, I couldn't speak, I couldn't ask people over things, I couldn't go to the pharmacy to get what I needed, and she's like, and now I can't stop thinking about all people coming into our country who can't speak our language. And it was like, it gave me like chills. It was one of the most impactful experiences on the trip.
Absolutely. Thank you. So really quickly, the ICA, it varies 7 to 10 days. It's attached to a class. Can you do a 2-minute elevator speech, Dr. Carrier, how you did the Singapore one?
Oh,
That's where I'm going to.
okay. I'm just thinking about it in terms of, okay, there we are. All right, so there we are again. Okay, over. No, so the intensive course abroad, we do some pre-departure work to kind of preface the individuals that signed up. Not all the students were in CNHP. I had design students. I had one PhD student. Where is she? Right-hand side, second student in psychology. So it always makes me interested to why did you pick something in mental health? But so we kind of explore that for the first couple of weeks. They have pre-departure assignments and they have in-country work to do. One of the most important things in-country is to attend every day. Now, of course, they have an illness or whatever, but to attend every day And then we did a debrief at the end of the day where they had then journal. They had to go back and make comments and, you know, how does today impact you, et cetera. We had some activities that were planned, some things, excursions together, some things they did on their own. I was teasing Dr. White because when we first started, the students were right next to you. Like they arrived on a Sunday, and Monday they're real close. By Friday, it was like herding cats. They were like all over Singapore, right? So they got accustomed to their rail card. They're catching the trains and buses going everywhere. Singapore is a very small city state, so you literally can't fall off. You can't get lost. And at the end, they come back and they have a final project that's due at the end of that week. You know, a multi-page assignment. During the week, they gather artifacts to support their assignment. So it's a pretty intensive course abroad because they pack it all into that week, and they have the final expectation when they return.
And something that Dr. K, I knew she wasn't going to say this. So she is the expert in psychiatric rehabilitation, and she's been going there for years to train on this model. To me, the biggest benefit that the students got to see, they got to see a model that they were familiar with a different culture, and how that culture infused that model into their mental health system, right? They talked about different things that were culturally specific, things that they wouldn't consider, right? When we think about ADLs here, in Singapore, nobody cooks, right? Right, because food is $1.50. Right, right? And so one of the people who toured us around, he said, well, we don't practice cooking because nobody cooks, so you can go right down the street and get a meal for $2, so why would you cook? So if I was going over there saying I'm going to teach people ADLs, I would be out of my depth. Activities of daily living, thank you. Thank you. Right? And so students having a face-to-face experience with how do I become who I'm emerging to be in a different context. When I don't know everything, how can this work, right? And how am I okay with that? How do we fuse and blend knowledge? How do we make things work in different contexts? And how do we sometimes step away and let other folks take the lead? I was so impressed that Dr. Carey did not interrupt one time, right? Because some people have control issues. Well, you forgot this part of psychiatric rehabilitation, right? Well, don't forget these steps, right? She sat there and they did it and talk. She said, all right, next. Because they're the expert of their own society, of their own culture, right? And so when we are teaching, when we're educating, when we're doing research, it's important to keep those things in mind. So we have about 10 minutes left that I left open. Oh, that middle picture, I just wanted to prove I was in Nigeria. And they bought me that outfit and dressed me and did my hair wrap. So I just, and there's nurses, so I felt like CNHP, you know. Questions or even feedback, comments?
I had a question about your thoughts on the whole like local, global sort of framework. Do you know about this? Like, you know, that we're helping out locally so that we can help out globally. I don't know. I've seen like.
So do you mean partner with an organization that has global impact in our area?
How do you, what am I asking? I'm asking like, there are so many initiatives like in local neighborhoods that where people don't speak English, or you know, we're doing a lot of projects to help people, maybe refugees, and then we're also going abroad. And how do you sort of talk about those two as initiatives around social justice, but that are under the same umbrella? I don't know. When I was at Jefferson, they had this fellow who was always talking about the local programs that they're doing, and how is like what we're doing locally global? Do you know what I mean?
Well, so I don't know. There's this agency which I know you know about Labacare, and so I don't know if this is what you're referencing, but you know there are a bunch of community organizations that do work internationally, and two things we can do. And I don't know if this is the Glocal model. First thing is I am a proponent for inviting guest speakers into the classroom, so that's one way we can do it. But the second thing that we can do is something my mom always said: when you go into someone else's house, you follow their lead. Right? And so when you are volunteering with organizations, you go in with this mindset. What do you want me to do? how can I help, right? You don't go in and say, listen, I just learned about this new model. I think it'd be really good for you all, right? No, you go in with an open mind about how you can help. Now, as in regards to a Glocal model, I've never seen that. I would have to do research on it. Jess, do you know about it?
Well, to say model is too strong a word for the way I think about it, but I have thought about it and have taught about it in different programs, science, technology, and society. And what I would say is one of the things we have to do as a university is train our students to understand the way that global economic processes, global media processes are intertwined in virtually everything we do anyway. So if you're looking at, say, healthcare, you're thinking about aging policy, which was what our ICA was focused on. Have people think about how care provision, like for instance in this country, how international labor markets affect who's going to be taking care of older people in this country, for example, just off the top of my head.
That's a great.
So it's to me, the idea of Glocal is a way of, it's a frame of analysis that we should train ourselves to be applying all the time, looking for ways in which things we assume to be just our world might in fact be connected to a much broader sphere, or go back to the concentric circle.
It's a bad
visual.
Thank you, Kate. Oh. Any other questions or comments before we end? Yes.
So I'm a master's of science student at the College of Medicine, and I was interested in finding out how that program in ICA gets funded if you're not part of CNHP, or where I can find out more information.
So I don't know if yours did, Jess, but she wanted to know how those ICAs get funded if you're not a part of CNHP. Does someone want to field that?
You can apply.
They were open to everyone.
Yeah, they were open to everyone.
As it happened, all of our students were in CNHP.
Yeah, and as I mentioned,
Didn't
the
have to
online
be
work.
there.
Right.
Okay, and you supply online.
I mean, I actually did one that it actually included one undergraduate senior, and the rest were all graduate students.
Yeah.
So, she had to, go through an interview and such, but.
Okay, is it usually during winter break and then summer?
So it's so when you go away, it's the week off you have between terms.
Okay.
Trying to
So we
plan, although it depends.
Yeah, so we've had different times.
We've had times during the week because it's part of a larger course, and then we had options for some students just took the ICA, but it was during week 7 of the quarter.
Oh, okay. But that was when it was attached to a
attached to a
credit.
course.
Attached to a course.
Yeah.
So there are different options. You just find the one that you like, and then talk to the Office of International.
Yeah, you can go right to the International Studies Office and see the options there, and they're really good about explaining, in terms of when is your best time to go, and even in your curriculum, when is the best time to go and experience something. So you have several options.
Okay, thank you.
Are you doing work locally as well as globally? What do you do?
I work all the time,
Are you doing
everywhere.
Tell us what you're telling.
So in regards to this, the ICA, so I'm currently in the process of developing 2 ICAs, one to Nigeria and one to Trinidad and Tobago.
Around what topic?
So around global mental health, specifically trauma, and then break it down. So I'm concerned, so my research interest is around the African diaspora. So how Black folks are doing around the world with their mental health and identity development, how they cope with multiple levels of trauma, individual all the way up to systemic, and also national disasters such as hurricanes. So I'll be in Haiti this December because they're still impacted by the earthquake. But anyway, and I also like long walks on the beach. We're good? Thank you all for coming out to support me. Right? My narcissistic upbringing, right? Thank you for coming to support me. The knowledge. Hopefully you learned something. Hopefully you take something away. And have a good day.
Thank you.
Last weekend.